Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about stuff that you may not have known about core, or stuff that I didn't know about core from my experience that took me a little longer to figure out so that I can help jumpstart you to my revelations. Is there an echo? Okay, so let's start a new project and we'll say things I didn't know. Is that too long? Okay, things I didn't know about core when I first started. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is that your core game file exists on your computer. So a lot of times when you start with an online first system, it's associated with your account. It's backed up to the cloud. Neither of these are true. I can switch between my accounts and work on the exact same games as long as they're saved on my computer. And I have two computers. So there's a bunch of games that I just cannot access right now. So I just made this game. It's called, what did we say? You can find it up here on this window. This window is called the main viewport, by the way. So if you're ever looking for it and you can't find it, it's called main viewport. That's a useful thing. So this is called things I didn't know. So if I want to find it, there's this handy tool where I can say file, show project in Explorer. And sorry if this is really tiny for a bunch of you guys, you folks. So we're going to show project in Explorer, and then we'll see that I am in a folder now that's under documents, my games, core, still all caps. Someday we'll change that. Saved, maps, and things I didn't know. Here's some things you didn't know about core. Core is capital C and then lowercase O-R-E. And I just, yep. No matter how many times I say that and believe that, people just all caps core all the time. Yeah, I don't mind. I'm just letting you know. So you can see if I look on this nav here, these are all of my way too many projects that I have. If I delete it in the core editor, it also deletes here. So now I'm in this file, and there's always, all of them have, basically, they'll have this data folder. What's a good one? Data folder, and then eventually once you add screenshots, it creates a screenshot folder. Temp, I forget, I think temp is when you export templates. User settings will be about the way you set things up. And we've talked about, if you've ever done the GitHub tutorial, that you don't need to save all of these when you're sharing the project file. Things like temp and user settings and screenshots, you really just don't need to pass back and forth. And then in here, we've got a data folder. And in this data folder is a folder called tree. And in this, there are two files, asset manifest and tree. So we're going to start with asset manifest. Okay, we'll open asset manifest in VS Code. Yep. And we'll see that we have a fixed number of assets. So this is the magic that when we're trying to explain why core doesn't have imports, it's actually specifically because of this magic. Because your game is built entirely from these two files. This one, assets, just lists all of the assets that are in there. So right now we have sunlight, cube, right, which is the default floor, I believe, skylight, and sky dome. That's it. Those are the four things that are in here, right? And if I look at my actual core file, I can see that I have third-person camera settings is not an asset. And actually, if I delete it, I still have a third-person camera controller. Did you guys know that? Yeah. Bam. Everything's the same. That's in the project so that I can change it. It's not actually what's creating it. So we can see default floor is a cube. That's the mesh that it is. We can see that right there. It's renamed, but that doesn't matter for that thing. So we can look in here, and if I look at what each of these has, so let's look at default floor. It has an ID. It doesn't actually list the name, because these are the asset references. So this is not the hierarchy object. This is the thing the hierarchy object needs to exist. So in this case, it needs the asset, a cube, in order to make the default floor. So its name is cube because that's what the actual mesh is called, right? We're talking about the mesh. And then the type is that it's a static mesh. It's a bunch of points that form a shape that have collision by default. And it has an ID. And we're going to talk about assets versus objects actually a bunch in this, because I think that's a complex thing. Okay, so that's the asset manifest. So let's go back here and let's look at the tree. Now the tree is the instructions to take all of those pieces, right? Those are like our Lego blocks or our anything blocks, and then build up the project as it stands with them. So what we have is we'll have transforms. Let's look at something actual. So now here is default floor. This ID is going to be different from the one here in asset manifest. We can see it starts with 1, 2. This one starts with 1, 4. Now it's named default floor because that's its name in the hierarchy. And it doesn't have a rotation because the rotation is still default. So whenever you click that cycle button and it would basically delete things out of here, and you'd be back to the default version. And then the scale is not default as well. So we've got an X and a Y and a Z. And that's exactly what I look at, what I see when I click default floor and I go into properties and we look at the transform sections. We'll see that rotation, it's grayed out because we're at our default. And if I were to, let's do an experiment. So let's say I do this. I need to, I think, close this and open this up again. So let's whatever. We're going to save this. And then I'm going to go to the folder and I'm going to open asset manifest again. And what we should see is that the transform part of the default sky, not asset manifest, sorry, tree. So the transform part of the default sky, there we go, default floor, sorry. The location is empty again because it's just default. So it doesn't need to give you any data. So this is like really thinking about what is the minimum stuff that you have to save in order to be able to build up this whole project when somebody connects to it. That's the magic. That's why we can jump between games so fast. That's why your projects load so quickly when you're, editing them locally too, is because it is just building it up with existing stuff. We don't have to load in the meshes. We don't have to load in the audio. All of that is already there. We all have that. And then it just takes those pieces and assembles your game. I think that's really freaking cool. So yeah, that's the beginning. Okay. So now let's talk about groups and folders, because I think this is really interesting. So let's say, we want to, okay. I'm gonna build, I don't know, bat something. I don't know what we're doing here. We're gonna shrink this down, make it a bat and a baseball. Okay, so let's say we want this as a group. I don't know if you guys have not ever encountered these planes. By the way, this took me forever to find. I would just always do this when I wanted to move things. And we'll talk about local world space too, because that's super useful. Okay, so let's say I want to group these. Now, what the easiest way to do it, in my opinion, I select them both and we've got 3 options now. We used to only have 2, right? New folder, new group, and then there's actually secretly all of the 3 client contexts we could also do. But let's just think about folder and group. So if you're me, you're like, well, I don't know what a group is, but I'm familiar with folders. And I know that folders only exist to organize, right? So it makes sense to me to use a folder. And the answer is that you want to use a group. So if I use a group, I get a couple of interesting properties. So we're going to call this bat and ball. I get a couple of interesting things with this, right? Which is that I can now use group select mode to select them both. So if I select this right now, we can see that basically only the baseball bat is selected. Sorry, we're gonna fix this. It's driving me crazy. Boom. Okay, sorry. All right, now we're in the world. Okay, so now only the baseball bat is collected. If I type C, and you can see here that there's also a drop down here, so you can select group, which selects everything in the group or just the object. So if I type C, it's very hard to see, but these are swapping between group and object. And now if I select this bat with, oh, nope, I toggled it too many times. So we want to be in group, which has multiple things inside the box. So you're selecting multiple things. Then I select the bat, and I've actually selected this outer thing here, the bat and ball. And I'll just show you so you can see for real that we have selected the outer group. So instead of anything's in it, we've selected the outer group. Now that's super useful when you want to grab, because obviously the way we model in core is by putting a lot of pieces together when you want to just add a group. So now let's say I've got a bunch of bats and balls. So, oh, by the way, super useful technique, right? And this is actually not the way I'll do this, and I'll talk about what I would actually do if I wanted a bunch of bats and balls in a moment, right? Is I have one selected and I am pressing, instead you can Control C, Control V, but you can also just Control W and duplicate a bunch. Now these are all in the same space, but if I keep selecting them and keep moving them, you'll see that we have 5. How many? We'll find out. So that one still, I got another one. Okay. Ooh, how many times I duplicate this? Just trying to show off the power. Anyway, we've got a bunch of bat and ball groups. Now, let's say all of these need to be put together, right, for organizational reasons. So I select these and I this is what I used to not do. So now I put a new group of these and I say all the bats and balls, right? Boom. So now what I don't have is the option to select one of these. If I press C and I go back to object select mode, I get exactly one bat, right? It's not grabbing the ball as well. And if I press C and do group select mode, I select all of the bats. So one of the things that I used to do is I said, well, okay, for all the bats and balls, I'm going to make that a folder so that I only select the groups. But that's not performant, and we'll talk about that in a second. So what is the easiest thing? The way I do this now is I keep my object select mode, right? And I select this bat. And then I can use the left arrow to walk up the hierarchy. So if you see now, I have both this ball and bat selected because I use the left arrow. And basically it alternates between closing a folder or in the hierarchy, closing like a level in the hierarchy, and then walking up it. So if I press left again, it has closed this up. And if these were inside of another group, which I guess they are, then I select that group. And if I left arrow again, I close the group. And you can do the opposite. So you can open it and select the top one and then right click to basically walk down that hierarchy, but it doesn't go like down. That's up and down with the arrow keys. You can also navigate that way. So the left and arrow key this is like my favorite thing. I have a project where I have these tables, and the tables are also obviously made of like a ton of cubes, and then they have their own collision box, and they have, a bunch of different things. Every time I have to select them, I'll click an object because they're all in one group, and then I have to walk the arrow key up. And it's only, how deep are your groups really? Ideally not. There are performance problems with like really super duper nested things that we can talk about. Now, so let's talk about what happens if we put this in a folder instead. Okay, so let's look right now at our asset, our tree. So we should have, I never know if, like when I used Atom, everything always updated automatically. Let's see here if we have anything called bat in here. No. Okay. So, but when I use VS Code, it saves the previous state and doesn't just like aggressively change my code, which makes sense. Okay, so now that I look at this and I search for bat, still don't have it. I maybe have not saved the project. Let's save the project. Control S to save, Control Shift S to save the project and all of your scripts. Really nice. Especially because it's easy because scripts save differently from the project. That's another interesting when we get to the scripting section we'll talk about. So Control Shift S will save both of them, and that's really nice to make sure that you're testing the latest state. So for that reason, now let's see if it automatically changed. Okay, so now here we've got my object, all the bats and balls, and then we've got bat and ball, and we've got a bunch of these. We can see on the right here that I basically have a bunch of things that say bat in them. Just going on through different IDs for all of them, different locations because I moved them around, and they're all here. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is we're gonna take bat and ball, and by the way, ungroup is really useful, especially when you're moving origin points on, which is the thing I'm going to talk about next. So we're going to ungroup contents to put these all in a separate thing, and then I'm going to right-click and I'm going to click new folder containing these, and they're going to be bats, and we'll call this baseball equipment. There we go. Okay, so now I'm searching for bat. I'm typing bat in my tree.pbt where the hierarchy is, and it's gone. There is nothing called bat here. What happened? Where did it go? The answer is that what folders do is create separate tree files like this. Because basically what happens is when you change anything in here, you change the whole file, right? So that means if you are using GitHub, your complete project file is changing anytime you change like the sky. And that's not what we want, right? Especially if we're trying to collaborate with others. So what happens is now I created a new literal folder, you can see it here, in my data tree folder called baseball equipment. And it has its own asset manifest, which is all of the core object references that are in here, right? And its own tree. This is what happens. So if I go into this tree, the top level is called baseball equipment. And inside of it are the objects bat and ball. And we've got parent IDs. We've got both of the children, which we know are that bat and that ball. Makes sense. And so we made a whole separate file. So if I'm tracking this, right, or I'm collaborating with others, which is, the most useful system, what I can do is I can make a folder for each person, and I can make folder for each part of the project, so that these things stay really compartmentalized, and I can look at different things, because you can imagine that tree.pbt file in a project with no folders is massive, right? And the whole thing changes every time, because I think there's something changes. It's like if anything in the project has been updated, it refreshes something. Is it the endings? I forget what. All I know is that it shows up as a lot of green or changed lines in GitHub. So that's groups and folders, and wow, that took me longer than I thought. But now we've got at least an idea of it. And so these IDs, right, for the objects in here, they actually match the ones in the tree. So if I go into baseball equipment and I select this, I can right click and I can say, where is it? Copy MUID, right? So this is the first bat and ball. Now let's go back to the tree.pbt in baseball equipment, and you can see how very quickly dangerous. We've got two files with the exact same name in VS Code, and so it's really easy to be looking in the wrong one, but I can see which folder they're in, so that helps. Right, so this is my first bat and ball, and here's the ID. Your ID is basically a unique ID with some letters after the colon for the name. The core is not reading those. That is entirely for us to be able to keep track of what thing it is. So let's talk about creating templates early. Okay. So let's say right now I've got all of these identical groups that I made, and I'm like, you know what this wood needs? It needs to be more cracked. I want like a gnarlier bat. So I'm gonna go in here and I'm going to, let's see, material is called fabric. That must be the handle. And man, that's kind of a nice material. All right, and we're gonna take this wood one, and we're going to change it to, I think there's like wood planks is the one I want. I think my gnarliest wood is called wood planks. Because the wood floors are nice. Wood slice crate. Ooh, I wonder what that's like. No. That's like a 9 slice, isn't it? Wood strand board? I mean, that's different enough. That looks sort of like particle board-ish. Let's see what happens if I... Oh, yeah, that's very particle board. That's not the look I'm going for. Let's see here. Give me wood planks. We're going to do that. Okay. Yeah, wood planks has like some depth and kind of cracks to it. So it's a little bit... We're looking at the wrong angle. But let's say I switch this to wood planks. If I wanted to do that to every bat in this group, I have a couple of options, right? I could select every bat, and I can select, hold, control, and just keep selecting this way, and that's pretty fine, and just change it that way, right? The alternative is that I could delete all of the bats besides so which one did I modify? This first one. I modified the first one. So if I deleted all, I could basically, and I've done this before. So you take your bat and ball and you're like, well, this is what I want it to look like now. And then I look at this bat and ball right here and I'm like, okay, well, I want to put this one there. So I'm going to copy the properties, take this bat and ball, duplicate it, paste the properties, which are position, and that's the only one I have to worry about here. And I'm moving my new copied object there and then deleting the previous one, and now you see I have replaced that. So that's one of the ways, and like, believe it or not, if you have like really complex model and you want to do that, but obviously that's actually not what we want to do at all. So let me delete all of the bats and balls besides the first one, and we're going to make a template so you can see how useful this is. So here in the group, I'm going to right click, I'm going to say create. All right, we'll talk about what I want to change about this in a second. So let's do create new template from this. Bat and ball, that's a template. So now if I drag out template instances, and you can see I can do this, they are not as floating because they, snap to the ground first, which is nice. I'm happy about that. So let's say now that I want to dramatically change, let's change the fabric here. So we're going to go into this, and instead of fabric light brown, we're going to grab that gnarly burlap, that one. and unsmart material it, so we get all of the things about it. Yeah, we're getting a little more like an old baseball bat is kind of the look we're going for here. Now that I've made that change, right now I can update the template from this, and any template that isn't de-instance is automatically going to carry over. You can see the little burlap patch there, carry over those changes. So if you think about when you're doing like a long-term build, that ability to change, if you're going to repeat like a tile or a part, that ability to change one of them and duplicate those changes is like extremely useful. And you want to do it early on because it's really hard to replace these things with the templates besides like I just showed you. Basically, I would go through, I would copy the location of the thing, copy my template, paste those properties, and then delete the original thing. And you know, you could delete it first if you're feeling very confident about the whole process. But in general, like this is kind of a pain. Like we could take this and let's make this material sports ball. Let's make it burlap as well. Boom. Right, and so now I've got this like gnarly looking ball. I love it. So that's one example of things you could do. Okay, so for my next example, I'm going to use a car built by the illustrious Fens for things you should know as you're building to optimize early. So let me look at, it's called minivan. I think it's all one word. Yeah, and we're going to import this so you can kind of see what this looks like in practice. So I just imported from community content. I'm assuming everybody knows how to do this. We've got some references to do that if you don't know. So now that I've instance that package, I'm going to throw this in here. Okay, so what's the first thing I notice? The wheels go through the ground. If I'm building something for myself, then it doesn't matter that much. I'm used to it, so I'm just going to build it whatever. But if I'm going to share it on community content, the thing that I want most is that the moment you throw it into the world, it lands the way it should go, right? Which means that I need, right, what core does is it puts the bottom of your thing on the ground, right? And so what I need to do is move the bottom of the car. So here is how we're going to do this. We're going to put a, let's grab a cube. There's a lot of ways to do this. This is just one that I'm about to show you, but we're going to grab a cube and I'm going to stick it here. And we're going to put the wireframe texture on it. So actually I grabbed the wrong cube. What I want is the bottom aligned cube. Because basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to create something whose, let's see here. Can we do drop to floor? Okay, that is working. Okay, I had some time when that wasn't working. And I'm going to use this cube to basically determine where I actually want this to be. So this is, let's say, what should be the center, and it should be touching the floor. And then I'm going to take my minivan. And we're going to select it all, right? Keeping in mind that I could also click a wheel here. We're in group select. So if I'm group select, I just select it all. But if I click this wheel, left arrow, because there's not any more folders, that was just all I needed to select the car. And I'm going to pull it up to where I would like it to sit on the ground. And you could say like, okay, well, car wheels squish a little bit. So sinking them down a little bit actually looks more realistic. So let's do that. Let me get back to the sunny side. So this is going to be it. And again, I completely eyeballed this. There are ways to do it. I have the cube that represents the origin. And what I'm going to do, if I want exactly its origin, is I'm going to right click this cube and I'm going to say new group containing this. If you have only one object, it will always have the exact same origin, that central point of where those arrows are anchoring, the exact same one. So I'm going to call this minivan, like that. And then I'm going to drag all of these objects. I'm going to select this, up arrow to close, and drag it into my other object. Did it work? It did. Okay. So now if I select minivan, it's right on the ground. Okay. So we move minivan into minivan. We're going to ungroup everything that's in here. Sorry, we're going to de-instance, and then we're going to ungroup, and then we're just going to create a new template from this, right? There's no update template from this. Yeah. So we'll make that minivan. Okay, so now we have a minivan that's in my project content because I made it. From here, I can delete this cube. I don't need it anymore. Deinstance delete. And now if I press this minivan and use the magical X key to populate a bunch of copies of it, boom, you can see that it's landing nicely with its wheels touching the ground. If I were trying to take Fenz's original minivan here, let's see, so now if I drag it out and I drag it in here, and this is the one that sits on the ground, what I have done to fix this, right, is we select everything in here. So I held shift to click the first thing, held shift and click the last thing in the list. And then I can just move this up to where I want to be. And the original template, the outside parent, didn't move. So the minivan, basically everything else changed its transform relative to the parent. So that's like the other ways. You just basically grab all the things in it and move the group. And I've done that before, and that's super useful. Okay, so that's one of the reasons you'd move origin points is to have things land on the ground. So let's grab another piece. So if you're working right now on 2020 the game, then you probably need this piece of community content, which I created, which is a dumpster. Oh, wait, someone made an open version of it. That's what I was going to show you. All right, well, this is probably close to what the person who made the openable version of it is. But if I add this in, right, what I want to be able to rotate open these, but you can see where they are. If I press the rotate key, they rotate out the wrong way. Also, you're going to notice that this is a solid piece. It's not actually ideal. But those are other things that you could deal with, right? Because that's not what I want. So I could try flipping this over, right? That would be one potential solution, right? But what I want is to basically keep the exact same thing. Oh, you know, there's another thing that I can use as an example of this. So we can grab this, and this is going to be the same problem. So I'll throw this in here, right? And it has the same problem, but it's not that it's at the wrong end, but it's actually at the center, right? So this is a cylinder here for the lid. It's a chamfered cylinder, I believe. By the way, chamfered is really nice when you want like looks like this. You can do Tubbs's pancakes, but if I try to rotate this, this is not what toilet lids do, right? So what I want to do is I just want to move it so that the pivot point is right here, closest to the toilet. Let's move to the sunny side of the toilet. That's also a metaphor for 2020. So how would I make this lid pivot open? Well, what I'm going to do is I am going to, inside of toilet, create a new group. So we're going to say just right click. So I right clicked toilet because I don't want it to just be in the hierarchy, and I said new group. We're going to de-instance it so we can do this, and I'm going to call this lid, and I'm going to use a capital L just so that I know that this is mine. And then I'm going to take this group and I'm going to move it where I think the pivot point on the lid should be, which, by the way, also cool keys F to focus it. Not that great, but once it's focused, I can hold Alt and I can use right click to scroll closer smoothly instead of like with the wheel where it's like weird. I don't know why it's being weird. Come on. And then the other thing is with F, Alt, scrolling in a little bit. Why is it? Okay. Dragging towards it should scroll in, but it's a little bit weird on what's towards. I can also use right click to orbit around, and that is really nice when you're trying to line things up on multiple dimensions. Even scripts, insert yourself, have transforms when you drag them into the hierarchy. Like they have a position and you can like get that position data from them and use them, which is, if you've ever used, I have a chair sitting script, and it's basically just like a tiny modification on AJ's chair sitting script. And the way he did it in getting the location of where you should put the players by just making it the transform of the script. I'm going to change that so that it's an object that you can see that hides itself so that you can make more things sittable. But okay. So what I'm doing is I'm like, this is about where the hinge of my toilet seat should go. Okay. My lid. And we could put the seat in a separate one too if we wanted to. So now I'm going to take this object lid and I'm just going to stick it in that group. So now if lid has an origin there, and if I rotate it, let's keep that named lid. And if I rotate this, it still does the thing I don't want, right? Which is no good. But let's say I reset the transform, use left arrow to select its parent. And now I can open it up and drop it back down. I could create a script that rotates it. Like if you've done that light bulb tutorial I mentioned, that's a really great place to also just look at like how would I rotate random things. I now have, look at this toilet. So toilet, let's zoom in. Let's really take it in. We can now rotate the toilet seat the way we want. And sometimes you don't even need this for scripting. Maybe it's just like, if you've ever watched Witcher Silver, used to stream a lot, and a lot of the ways he rigged up characters was by essentially making a group that had origins at the right joints. And if you're making costumes, that's also a really useful thing to do. Okay, so let's go back. So you can imagine with the dumpster, I would just do the same thing. I'd make a separate group for each of these so that I could open them independently, and have the origin be here so that I can rotate up and down. Okay, so let's talk about this car. Let's look at this one. Let's say I wanted to change its color, and I gotta get out of full screen to do this. Okay, so if I select this and I change the color override to say pink, right? I change exactly one object. So I skipped something about what I would do if I was changing this color, right? Which is that first I would select this color, and then if I double click the color picker, you can save colors. So if I want to save like a bunch of different colors, let's say I want like, oh, this green or something like that, I can save those, and that's really nice when you want to do them. You can also, I believe, copy paste them, and it just paste, or you could, copy their hexes and paste them. I don't know if that works if you just use like, if I can just paste those normally, but let's say I want this green. Then when I select all of these things, and now it won't actually matter if I select like, I selected the floor, I don't want that. Do this, boop, doop, although I'm making it green, so maybe the floor even wouldn't have changed that much. And let's say we're going to try to change the color on this. I can select here, green color, bam, and we get it. And I've got this nice Z fighting indicator for the places that I missed. Boom, boom. Okay. Now, if I want to change it, I would have to select all these things. Here's something different I could do. Now, to fix this model, I'm going to have to select everything in it. But let's just do one side, and then we can kind of work through this whole thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these. And I'm pretty sure, here's what I think. I could be wrong about this. And this is like just like kind of like a nuanced core thing, right? But let's see if we can't get these, and maybe the ceiling too. Get that. Okay, everything that's using the car paint texture. Even if I don't want to change anything but the color override, even if I don't want to change the color override, for any model that I'm publishing, especially to community content, I'm usually going to use a custom material. All right, there's a little bit of a weirdness here because I have a color override that's non-standard. But let's see if it works. So now let's say I want to change the color. Let's see, we want to make it this pink. We do that. And right now it's only working for ones that don't have the color override, which is a little bit annoying. Okay, so I needed to reset that probably before I did the custom material and things like that. But I think I have another way around it. And we're just going to hit this cycle button to revert to default. And then basically it's just not going to override whatever color I selected. And what this does is a couple of amazing things. So I do this really early when I'm modeling. Because if I want to change it later, it actually, custom properties, you can change the material that it's about. So let's say I'm like, okay, I just don't, the car paint, it's called car paint, so people use it for car paint, but it's like really busy. I actually rarely use car paint for cars, and I've spent a lot of time making cars. And so what I can do is custom car paint. One, I name these, so I would say like, minivan paint. So what I'm using my naming convention, this is completely a Slinkusism, is the thing that it's being used for and then something that describes it so that I know what it's supposed to be and I can find it later. So now I can pick actually a completely different thing. So let's say I just want to use advanced material that has a lot of options for me. And you can see it's a lot less burbly. It looks a little more like a Barbie car now. I mean, besides the color, it's a little bit plastic looking. But you see it updated everything. Now I could change that color. Say I want it to be, I actually liked the blue. We'll do that. And we've got it all set up. So that is one of the cool things that custom materials allow me to do. So if I had done this with everything on the car, then basically I could change this thing to wood. And I don't have to select every object in it. Let's just do bark or something ridiculous like that. So I don't have to select every object in it. I now can change it. So if I'm making something on community content, one of the first things people want to do is they want to change the colors and materials. Like that's just, I mean, some people will use your stuff right out of the box, but a lot of times it's like, no, this is really great, but for my artistic style, I need to at least change the color. And this makes that a lot easier. Even if you don't want to customize materials, this is one of the great reasons to, I'm going to go back to advanced materials so we can talk about some things on that. So this is one of the great reasons to just use this out of the box. And I always use like thing I'm using it for, and then something that describes the material. It doesn't need to match the material name, because like I said, I could change it from paint to advanced material, but what I want to know is like, what is it supposed to look like? Well, it's supposed to look like car paint, so I call this minivan paint. Because that gets across the idea. So there's a couple of other like, I dropped it in here. Material properties that I want to talk about because they're really easy to play with. For the most part. And I just, having no art background, I didn't know what any of these things meant. And that is really a really useful thing to understand. And it's really standard. So I think like in Blender, you'll get similar materials to this. In Unreal, obviously, you have the same materials. I've seen them in Houdini and probably other 3D modeling programs, Unity, all of these things. These are kind of like really common concepts in physics-based materials. So specular is from the Latin root mirror, and this is going to be how mirrory my thing is going to be. So this is literally how well it reflects, and we're going to see something interesting about that when I jack up specular to, I didn't do as much as I want. Okay, we're going to take roughness out. Because roughness gives the surface uneven, so it's like you took sandpaper to a mirror, so it's not very reflective. So metallic basically creates that huge difference between the light parts and the dark parts. Metallic is like, I want it to go from like black to white, and the less you want like that change, and the more you want just like the flat color, the less metallic you make it. You can see this is pretty much the same blue here as it is up here, and then when I go to metallic, we've got like almost black and like really bright places. But like metallic, if I take out the specular, you can see it didn't actually take out the shine. Never mind. So I'm going to keep metallic at like a little bit, so we get that maybe even a little bit less. Specular should have made it super reflective, so you can actually like see the ground and where the sky starts behind me. And this is actually, so the sky, I don't think, so you can kind of see a cloud there. I don't think this actually reflects this sky. It's like a separate thing. That I've kind of shown before is really interesting things. Okay, so that's specular. Roughness would make this like, again, more flat, kind of like if you want like that matte plastic look, that's what roughness is doing. We talked about metallic. Emissive is obviously making it glow, and faceted is kind of a fun one. So one of the things is that in any of these, you can actually put your cursor on the left side of the bar and drag it up. So let's get faceted going. It's easier with rounded surfaces. It's not looking good here. But I use this to make it, okay, so we can see it with these round pipes. It starts chunking it up into like a polygon shape. So you can kind of fake a low poly look with it. And it's really nice. I've made like turn spheres into disco balls and things like that with it. So gradients are really great. I saw, for creating some division in your space. Obviously, I'm really nailing it. Let's take those facets back out. And you can see basically this is sort of messing up my whole thing here. Am I not using smart materials for these? I guess I think I am for most of them. So we're going to make this gradient world space. No, that's still applying per object. Okay, maybe not the best use of it here. So we're just going to revert the gradient. Distortion, if you've ever used like the bubble material or the cloud material or things like that, you can actually animate this. So if I wanted to do this, distortion, and add some speed to it, you'll start seeing that it's a little bit hard to see. Let me find an edge here. That its edges are moving around like water. So if you could make a completely flat, solid colored, not using the water material thing that burbles around, and I can make that go really fast, and I can make it go really far if I want. And we've got this like chunking thing. So if you wanted, like, I've used this before to create like gentle blowing in the wind for fabric and things like that, is one of the ways you can kind of hack this to do something sort of interesting, or like, just give things sort of a breathing feel. This is a little fast, but you get the idea. And we get, yeah, it's just weirdness. It's just water-like, and that's just part of the advanced material, but all of these material properties are present in some other material as well. It just totally depends on what you're doing. So that's kind of all of my material related things. And so rather than getting into all of the scripting weirdness, because we've been in a very modeling focused thing, I'm going to talk about the thing that I want everybody to know the most about publishing to community content. And that is about template packs. Oh my God, template packs. They're huge, guys. Folks, all right, I'm going to do this, and then this will be my last thing for you. But let me look. There was somebody who made what was it called? Science class templates. Okay. And I import this, and you'll see if I do this and I drag it in, the origin is here and all of the stuff is over here. And that is because they probably modeled it here and then made a group that started at 0. So anytime you find that this is happening, is the first thing you need to do is ungroup that. So I'm going to take science class. I'm going to select ungroup. I'm going to select de-instance and then ungroup. Got to remember the de-instance. And then ungroup contents. And now each of these things, whiteboard, things like that, they have their normal origin points. Now, all of these are folders, and none of these I would make folders myself. So I would literally, and you see this there, this is exactly how I started too. If you need to convert a folder to a group, my favorite technique is that you right click the folder, select new group containing this. So you keep exactly the origin, assuming the origin is where you want it. What was the contents called? Whiteboard top. So we'll call this whiteboard top. And then I select the folder inside and I select ungroup contents. And I did this when we were doing the costume contest. I had to do this to a couple of the costumes. So like, this is great, but I don't like, how would I use this if I were a creator, right? Even we could look at these markers, right? We could package these markers individually if we wanted instead of just as one. But like, it doesn't make sense that I would want to drag this whole thing out, right? I probably want like the skeleton, and this person also published the skeleton separately, so that makes sense. But you could make these all separate things. So how are we going to do that? Let's look at the dry erase markers. Let's make a template pack of dry erase markers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create templates for all of these. So I'm going to say, create new template from this, keep the name, create new template from this, keep the name, create new template from this. You get the flow, you folks. So if I want to publish a template pack where each of these are individual templates, and right, the advantage of individual templates is that I can drag out multiple copies. I can spawn copies of individual markers. Say I wanted to create a game where like, you know, you pick up a different one every time, and I want to spawn it as an equipment, right? Obviously I'm going to want these to be separate templates. Yeah, Tops, you're definitely how I found this set. So I want to publish all these. So I'm going to find them down here in my project content. We've got blue marker, green marker, orange marker, and I'm using control to select them. So I selected all 5 of these. I right click and I can export as a PNG. This will actually export them all as separate PNGs in case you're wondering. So if I publish this to community content, I'm gonna overwrite. Yes, sorry, it's making me do that. I'm gonna say whiteboard markers. I think they're really nice. I don't know. I put a lot of effort into my whiteboard markers and I like these better. Mine even say Expo on them. And this has the whatever I want. You know, I feel bad just publishing somebody else's template. Also, let's zoom in so that it only has red through blue. Take that. All right, we got it. We got the whiteboard markers. They're in folders, and which should be right, because we know now each of those folders now creates a new tree.pbt file, which we don't want, and it takes up a lot more space for the game. It increases the load time. It's just not good, which should be groups. So we add this, and I'll publish this public, I guess. I'm going to publish it privately. I don't like that. Review and publish. Nice zoom in and publish private. So, okay, so now let's open a new project just so we can see what it looks like when we Back to main menu. When we do this, we'll create an even new empty project, start project. Gonna delete this. Obviously, I'm probably not because I don't do that enough. And I search marker. I see mine because I published it privately, so I can see it on all of my things. I would have to be logged into the same account, so if I were using my other account, I would not. And when I open this up, I now have individual, you can press F to see it, individual markers, right? And if I were spending a lot of time optimizing this, I probably would have put the origin right there on it so that I could rotate it up and it would be more where I expect it to be, right? So that's all the things I do before I publish the community content. Super useful stuff. This has definitely been a modeling focus. Stay tuned. I'm going to do things that are unexpected about scripting at some point in the future. Black cat. Did my black cat just jump in front of the camera? Come here, black cat. Say hello, black cat. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. This has been Slinkus, and I will see you all in the future.